So I've got some cards as well. I'm hoping I won't have to refer to them too much, but they're in my back pocket. So some of the speakers, I think, well, quite a lot of the speakers have touched on what the future is going to look like, and it seems quite uncertain, the future of mental health. A lot of the people here are focusing on kind of how they can invent the future, and that's something I want to talk about today. So recently I've been really inspired. Kind of 2012 for me is a year of being creative and trying to put that creativity into action. So obviously in my day job I have to try and be creative, usually for Coca-Cola and people like that. But I thought I wanted to do some creative things for myself, so I've become involved in a few extracurricular activities, and I'll come to one of those a bit later on. But I'm going to not so much talk about me, but talk about kind of us all in the room. It's kind of a bit of an audacious talk, but I'll see how we go. So there's something that I want for all of us, and I want this to be the beginning of a year in which we focus on fostering our creative and our imaginative capabilities, and we focus on applying those to the things that matter most in the world around us at the moment. So thinking about what some of the speakers have spoken about already, and thinking about the world around us at the moment, it just strikes me that there's an incredible amount of uncertainty, financial, environmental, cultural, technological uncertainty, and it's lots of instability, political instability around the world as well. And I kind of feel like during these times, traditionally what we might do is we might look to institutions around us, so our banks or our governments, educational institutions, universities, and look for guidance about how we're meant to cope with this, rapidly changing environment. And the thing that I've been thinking about increasingly is that the institutions around us are kind of in it with us. They're no different to us. They're under massive strain at the moment, huge pressure, and some of them are coping moderately well, some are really struggling, and others, like our banks, are kind of failing. And increasingly it doesn't feel like incremental change, tweaking something here and tweaking something there is maybe going to be enough. And it sounds quite grandiose, but today I want to kind of talk a little bit about some examples where we kind of focus on beginning to think about how we can reinvent those institutions. And I think like the central capability of that is our creativity and our imagination. So I just want to kind of talk to three specific examples that I think are really inspiring, because there's a tendency for me to stand here and sort of wag my finger at you all and say, all you have to do is be creative and it will happen. It won't. It takes an incredible amount of hard work, obviously. I've kind of committed in 2012 to trying to take a few steps in that direction, and that's kind of what I want for us today, to think of this as that beginning. So the first example I wanted to talk about is one you might already know. It's called Kiva. So Kiva is a micro-lending, microfinance organisation. And the central creative idea to Kiva is to connect people through financial lending to try and alleviate global poverty. And so it's kind of this beautifully simple idea with an incredibly kind of impactful way of meeting the rest of the world. So since 2005 rather, so I guess that's seven odd years, Kiva's funded $284 million worth of loans globally. $284 million worth of loans, peer-to-peer funded and repaid by hundreds of thousands of people around the world. And 700,000 entrepreneurs across the world, in developing and developed nations. Kiva actually loans a lot to the US and other developed nations, have benefited from those loans, 80% of them being women. It's kind of an interesting stat, I just thought I'd throw it in there. For me, that's like an incredible example of a really creative way of rethinking finance, of rethinking a solution to an institution that's kind of struggling, not necessarily alleviating poverty, but rethinking that kind of institution, I think, was pretty amazing. I've noticed I've only got a minute left, so I'll jump to the final one, because it's the one that I'm kind of most passionate about at the moment, and you can ask me about the other one. So the final one is one based here in Sydney, and I wanted to talk about it because I'm kind of, only in a teeny tiny way, kind of involved, but I'm so inspired by it. So it's the Sydney Story Factory. And the Sydney Story Factory has as its central creative idea the idea that we need to foster creativity and imagination in young children in Sydney. And why I think that's kind of so important is, separately I'd read the work of Sir Ken Robinson, and he talks about the need to educate our children in creativity so that they're ready to cope with a future that is really uncertain. We don't kind of know what the future holds in many respects. This instability that we're experiencing now, that's kind of what the future holds too. So this kind of central function of creativity and imagination as a way to reinvent the future, I think it's just so important. And so in thinking about that, kind of, I wonder, like, you know, that's what we're applying for our children, so what about us? You know, why shouldn't that be good enough for us? So I kind of leave you again just by thinking, like, maybe this is the beginning of a year where all of us could focus on fostering that creativity and that imagination, and more importantly starting to apply it on the projects that matter most to us and matter most to the world around us. So that's everything. Thanks.